She is starting to pick up her stride, but she's got work to do. And here comes Leora. Leora and Channing Hill on the outside of Serengeti Empress, who digs in toward the rail. It's these two, Ladyapolis third, the others with plenty of work to do. It's down to these two. It's Serengeti Empress, who's holding off the challenge of Leora as they come down to the line. Serengeti Empress has taken the Kentucky Oaks.
All right, welcome back to the Racing Rundown podcast, episode number 17. We got a lot of stuff to get to today. Belmont Stakes preview, some probable predictions. The field is not yet 100% set up, but we got a good idea of who's running. We also had some big races out in California this weekend. Breeders' Cup implications, Shoemaker Mile. We'll get to that later on the show. We'll also talk about Santa Anita once again back in the crosshairs of all the animal rights activist groups. We will get to that. All of this on episode 17. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is obviously the Belmont Stakes. Belmont Day is June 8th, so we're still 2 weeks out. Not as marquee of a field as we were not initially thinking, but as marquee as it could have been if some stories were to believe. There would have been a lot more star power in this Belmont field. But I would definitely say there are some good horses in this, and I think it's an overall better field than the Preakness field was. You got Tacitus, who right now is looking like he's going to be the favorite. War of Will, the Preakness winner. Then Tax, Owendale, Spinoff, and Intrepid Heart was third in the Peter Pan Stakes. Master Fencer, the mystery horse from Japan, sixth in the Derby. Joeva won the Long Branch Stakes. You also got an intriguing news shooter who didn't run in the Preakness or the Peter Pan. Joeva won the Long Branch Stakes at Monmouth Park. Then you have Everfast, the fast-charging long shot, second in the Preakness. And then Sir Watson was second in the Peter Pan. The Peter Pan winner global campaign will not be in the Belmont Stakes this year. They said it did not fit his running schedule. But like I said, the favorite looks like it's going to be Tacitus. Tacitus is a fine horse. He always runs well on New York racetracks. But I think War of Will is going to get a lot of support. And I think War of Will has a good chance of being the first horse to win the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes without winning the Kentucky Derby since a Fleet Alex. That is surprising that there's been that long of a gap between a Preakness Belmont without a Derby winner. The only Triple Crown combinations that have been won is either two complete Triple Crowns or horses winning the Derby and the Preakness since a Fleet Alex in 2005. So it's very interesting what we're going to get from this Belmont field. I think it's a very, I don't want to say extremely talented, but I think it's got a lot of talent in there. You got some other horses that have not run in the Triple Crown yet. A lot of horses coming in from the Peter Pan. Some horses that ran in the Derby skipped the Preakness and are now coming back off that 5-week layoff. Now, I will say this week I will be starting the Belmont Profile Series. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to have a video out today or whether I'll start doing all those tomorrow. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Right now, we're just going to preview the field. Some of the other horses in there, like I said, Master Fencer, I think, has the potential to be a Lonnie-type horse. You remember a couple years ago, the year that Exaggerator won the Preakness, that was 2016. There was a horse from Japan, Lonnie, that came into the Belmont Stakes. He had not run particularly well in the Kentucky Derby, ran a little bit better in the Preakness, but was not impressive in either the Derby or the Preakness. But Lonnie ran well enough in the Belmont Stakes. He was third. He didn't factor in the photo finish that year, but Lonnie was a pretty decent horse coming off that previous efforts in the Derby and the Preakness. So Master Fencer is definitely a horse to pay attention to. There is a precedence there for a horse like him. Lonnie and Master Fencer have very similar running styles, although the one thing that I will give Master Fencer over Lonnie is that Master Fencer is not as ornery and unpredictable as Lonnie was. Lonnie was a very peculiar horse that had a very odd temperament, and it was not the most desirable temperament. Master Fencer, you don't hear all the stuff you hear about Lonnie with him. So, Master Fencer, there is a precedent there for him to run well in the Belmont Stakes. Not necessarily saying he's going to win, but I think if you play the Belmont Stakes, you're definitely going to want to have him filling out a trifecta or a superfecta. Tacitus, running on a New York racetrack, looks like a very typical New York horse trained by Belmont. Belmont has won the Belmont Stakes before. This would not be the first time that Belmont would do it. Also, there is a precedence there with War of Will winning the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes without winning the Kentucky Derby. Like I said, most recently done by a Fleet Alex. Some of the other horses that are in the race, Spinoff, kind of reminiscent to a horse way back 19 years ago. Commendable was 17th in the Kentucky Derby in 2000. Did not run a single race between the Derby and the Belmont Stakes. Won the Belmont and then didn't really do anything after that. So, Spinoff, 18th in the Kentucky Derby. There is a precedent there as well for him to do well. Not necessarily saying that he is, but there is the precedent there. And then you also have the second and third horses from the Peter Pan. That would be Sir Winston and Global Campaign, respectively. But we will get to more Belmont talk in the coming days, and next week on the show we're going to talk a little bit about, now we're going to shift gears to some of the action out in California. There were Breeders' Cup implications on the line on Monday, and the front-running long shot Bolo, who I tweeted about this prior to the race. I was looking at Bolo when I was watching the race, and he was intriguing to me, but he wasn't intriguing by the fact that he was necessarily a talented horse. It was the fact that Bolo had been a runner in the American Pharoah Kentucky Derby, and I tweeted that. A note about Bolo, I'm paraphrasing the tweet, but a note about Bolo, he was in the American Pharoah Kentucky Derby. Now, I had no idea that Bolo was going to go out there and steal the Shoemaker Mile on the lead at odds of 32-1. That was my mistake for letting that slip through, but I don't really think anyone had any. There was no way you could predict Bolo running that well off one race since a year and a half layoff. But, Bolo, good effort for him. I think once again, though, this field of milers in the United States is not anything to be too impressed with. Sharp Samurai is too inconsistent for me. Catapult is too inconsistent for me. And Delta Prince. Those three are all too inconsistent for me. I'm not particularly fond of any of them. And I haven't really seen the signs that is going to show me that any of those three horses are going to be able to take the jump and be consistent performers. Because you can have Catapult win a couple of races, but, Catapult is the most consistent of those three, and Catapult really is not that appealing. So, I don't really think any of these three horses, and these three horses that ran in the Shoemaker Mile this weekend are really, I would say, the best milers in this country. And none of them are really that good. I think once again, and I will release the article that I wrote about the race, the Shoemaker Mile, after I'm done recording with this. I will put that on WordPress. Racing Rundown is where you can find that on. I'll tweet a link to the WordPress website so you can check those out. That's also where we do our weekly uploads of the Breeders' Cup Moments series. That's on Wednesdays. We're going to be releasing 1991 this weekend. We're talking about Arazi. So that's just a quick plug for that. But none of the milers in this country this year are particularly impressive. Now, another horse that I want to talk about is Vasilika. She gets her second Grade 1 win of her career in the Grade 1 Gamely. Vasilika rose from the claiming ranks, trained by Jerry Hollendorfer. This filly or mare, whatever you want to call her, 5 years old actually. Yeah, I'll refer to her as a mare, but this mare is a very talented horse. Like I said, she rose from the ranks of the claiming races. She has won all her races with the exception of one since April 1st of last year. So Vasilika is a very impressive performer. She's won a lot of races. Now, granted, I will say some of her races in this winning streak were claiming race allowance races with optional claiming, but she's won the John Maccabee, she's won the Rodeo Drive, she's won the Goldakova, she's won the Megahertz, she's won the Buena Vista, she's won the Royal Heroine, and now she's won the Gamely. So Vasilika, another horse that just she put California older mares on the map for the Breeders' Cup. Now, I'm not necessarily sure where she would go from here, whether or not she would go in the filly and mare sprint or the filly and mare, or the distaff. I don't know why I called it filly and mare, something else besides that, but Vasilika, I would say probably she would target the distaff, and she's definitely it's in California, so that would be a very encouraging thing. She has not run well outside of California. She did win a claiming race at Saratoga back in 2017, but she was 4th at Belmont Park, another third at Saratoga, 6th and 3rd at Belmont, and then she won at Aqueduct. But since coming to California, she has won a lot of races out in California, and I think the Breeders' Cup being in Santa Anita this year would benefit her if that's the route they decide to take with her. Now, another race that was this weekend, now it wasn't a Breeders' Cup implication race, the Hollywood Gold Cup at Santa Anita, whatever you want to call it. That was this weekend. No longer a Breeders' Cup win in your in race, but still an important Grade 1 race for older male horses out in California. The 3 big horses in this race were Lone Sailor, who was a hard-charging second in the Oaklawn Handicap, just missed getting up to nail Quip in the final strides. Quip did end up holding on to win that Arkansas Handicap, but Lone Sailor looked very good in that Oaklawn Handicap. You also had Vino Rosso, who won a stakes race at Aqueduct in the winter, and then was 4th in his most recent outing prior to the Gold Cup. And then you had Giftbox, who looked to be this year's Accelerate. He won the San Antonio back in December, and he had won the Big Cap. And then he was the favorite for that race. But Vino Rosso was 4th in Carter Handicap prior to running in the Gold Cup. When's the last time you've seen Todd Pletcher ship a horse out to Southern California? And some of you guys were asking me about that on Saturday. You were wondering why Todd Pletcher was doing that, and I really didn't have an answer for you. My thought was that's just what best fit in with the schedule for Vino Rosso, because they maybe didn't want to send him in the Met Mile, and it's too far. The Whitney is in July, so you don't want to take that much time off April to July. So that's probably what fit best in with his schedule, and I would say that that's most likely the reason why. But Vino Rosso did win that Gold Cup, and now him winning the Gold Cup once again turns the male division on its head. This is what the male division this year has been like. You think you've got a horse that is going to take the jump. I mean, that's what we thought with Battle of Midway, and I'm not going to knock Battle of Midway because he did unfortunately have to be destroyed after an injury. So that's not Battle of Midway turning the older male division on its head had nothing to do with a performance. Once again, very unfortunate thing. And Battle of Midway is what really brought I don't want to say it's what got people to notice that there's something wrong at Santa Anita, which we'll get to what's going on at Santa Anita in the first or later on in the episode. But Battle of Midway, that's where I first heard about this incident, or the mass amount of horse deaths in Southern California during the winter. It was unfortunate. We fixed it for the most part. Now, like I said, I will get to that stuff later in the episode, but Giftbox, McKinsey was supposedly going to be the horse that takes the next step, and then McKinsey lost to San Pasquale. Then Battle of Midway had to be destroyed. And we haven't seen Thunder Snow on a U.S. track, so I'm going to reserve judgment on Thunder Snow until I see him run this year, and I will actually see him run live in the Met Mile this year. I am going to be at the Belmont Stakes. I have said that, and once it gets closer to the race, I will let you guys know what vicinity of Belmont Park I will be at. So if you want to meet up and talk racing at Belmont Park, I would definitely not be opposed to that. But back to Vino Rosso and Giftbox. Giftbox looked really good coming into this race, and all the signs pointed to him taking that jump and being the accelerator this year. But Vino Rosso is a pretty decent horse. I'm not saying that Vino Rosso is the best older male horse in the country, but he definitely put himself in this conversation. There's a lot of horses in there that are going to be in contention for this. I think it's going to be a question of whether it's Giftbox, Vino Rosso with a Grade 1 win, put himself on the map. You've also got Thunder Snow. I think that Thunder Snow's the best horse in the history of Maidan, but running in Maidan and running in the United States are two completely different things. So we'll see what happens with Thunder Snow once we actually get a larger sample size. But I have no reason to think that Thunder Snow wouldn't be able to handle America because he handled it last year. But like I said, we will see what we get with Thunder Snow when the time comes. But it's a very intriguing year for the older male horses this year. And while I think it's generally a weaker field than we've had in the past couple of years. The past few years, we've had a designated superstar gun runner 2017, accelerate 2018, and this year I don't really know if there's going to be a superstar. I think it's still up in the air at this point. There hasn't been a consistent performer, and I really think the only consistent performer this year that would have been battling Red Bull is no longer racing, no longer alive. But like I said, we'll see what happens with the older male division as we go through this year. I think it's intriguing, and like I said, I think there's a lot of horses that are going to be knocking on the door, but we'll see once we get a better idea, more races in, and we'll be talking all through the summer about who is going to take the jump. And I will probably have several different horses that I think will make the jump. I may change my opinions over the summer. I don't know how it's going to work out. But that's it for the discussion on the stakes races at Santa Anita this weekend. I do want to just make one more mention on the Shoemaker Mile. I don't really think anything significant is going to come out of the Shoemaker Mile. I think once again, Europe will rule the Breeders' Cup Mile division this year. I did say earlier that I wanted to talk about the situation that's going on out in Santa Anita again. Now, it's not as bad. At this point, it's not to the extent that it was back in the winter, really. It wasn't even April, but it's not to the extent that it was then. But like I have said, there is still stuff happening, so we are going to talk about that. Now, we had all the incidents during the winter and the several different closures of the track and all the people calling for Santa Anita to be closed permanently while people figured something out. Now, that didn't happen, but they made the changes to the track, and they made a difference. Santa Anita went 45 days without an incident, and, you know, with the fact that there have been 3 deaths in, I think it's 10 days, people aren't giving Santa Anita enough credit. They realized that there was an issue, they tried to fix it, and they did. Don't listen to the detractors. They made changes, and they did work. Now, once again, Dianne Feinstein is calling for Santa Anita to be closed. Dianne Feinstein is a complete idiot. Just ignore anything she said. Whenever she says something, she just needs to be... Just ignore Dianne Feinstein. It's not really that big of a deal. Like, she can comment all she wants. People who actually know what they're talking about, people like us, just let her make her comments, and then we'll see what the people who actually know what they're talking about have to say about this. But the one thing that I will say, and people are saying, you know, the media is once again having a field day with this, but they're completely ignoring the fact that this track went 45 days without incidents, which I think that's the big thing to look at. You know, it's unfortunate. Any horse fatalities should not happen, but it is going to happen, unfortunately. But that's the thing. The track went 45 days without something fatal happening. So the track isn't getting enough credit. Now, what I'm going to say about this, I both think this and hope this, that Santa Anita is not going to stick their heads in the sand and ignore the situation to the extent that they did back in the winter, because they saw the circus that it created when they allowed it to get to 19 before they addressed it. I think if this becomes a wider issue, they will do something about it, and they'll have to say, well, we tried to do something, and it worked, but incidents started happening again. So you're just going to have to see. I say let the situation play out over the next couple of days, and I'm going to reserve judgment on this just to see what goes on over the next couple of days, and then we'll get an idea of what is actually happening and whether or not something drastic is going to have to be done. Now, I will say at some point, I would not be surprised if Santa Anita decides to go back to synthetics, but I would also not be surprised if they didn't, because I know the Breeders' Cup is not very keen on running on synthetics, but, you know, I think if it came down to the fact of that would be going to synthetics would be what would keep the track open ultimately, then that's what you have to do. But, you know, just reserve judgment on it for a little while just to get a better idea on it. That's what I would say. That's what I'm doing. I don't know what you're going to do, but that's what I would say. So that's it for this episode. Remember to tune into the live show on Saturday night. I think what I'm going to do is to be able to reach people more, I will push the episode times back an hour, so they will start at 7, so more people can come on, and it's not starting at 8 and 8:30, really late for some people. So you got that to look forward to. The Epsom Derbies this weekend, so I will talk a little bit about that on my live show on Saturday. The limited knowledge that I have of English racing will be put to the test on Saturday. But so you got that to look forward to. Also, coming up on the 17th, if you have not heard already, we do have an interview with the Hall of Fame jockey, 3-time Kentucky Derby winner Gary Stevens. That's coming up on the 17th. I will update you guys on the time of that. I still do not have a time picked out yet. I'm waiting until the week before to figure out what time I want that to be. But like I said, you got that to look forward to. If you want more from Racing Rundown, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. All podcast episodes do end up on YouTube. I am backlogged right now, and hopefully once the summer gets here, I will be able to spend a couple of days uploading everything and getting done with my backlog. You can also follow us on social media. You can follow us on Instagram at Racing Rundown Podcast and on Twitter at Rundown Racing. Twitter is the best place to get stuff from me. Like I said, I had that note about Bolo, so you'll get that kind of stuff if you follow me on Twitter at Rundown Racing. So that's it for this week. I'll see you guys on Saturday and next week, where we'll be talking a lot of Belmont Stakes. And really just a lot of the stakes races that are going on Belmont weekend. So you got that to look forward to. See you then.
Gronkowski went to the lead. Thunder Snow out in the middle. North America down on the fence. Paddle from a long way back. Gronkowski the front runner. 250 metres to go. Thunder Snow on the outside, levelling up. Down the outside, Gunavera and Pavel. Thunder Snow going after Gronkowski. Thunder Snow reaches the front. Gronkowski fights hard. Thunder Snow, Gronkowski. Thunder Snow on the outside. Nose in front. It's double Thunder.